Don Stanhope and his wife, Phyllis, are having a serious talk about their son, Rudy. Rudy hasn't started to walk yet. Phyllis isn't worried. Rudy's only 11 months old. But Don is horrified that a son of his is still crawling at the age of almost a year. Don feels that Phyllis should be working on the problem. But it's been a long day for Phyllis, and her answer is to the point, as she sees it.
You're a real chauvinist pig.
And you're a typical self-centered feminist who thinks a mother should ignore her own kids whenever they get under her skin.
That's a cheap lie. All I want is a little time for myself.
Listen, as soon as he can walk, I'll teach him to play, and you can have plenty of time.
You mean I get all the dirty work, so you can get the rewards. And careful with that dumb football.
You won't think it's so dumb when Rudy's a great football star.
Like you, on the second team?
I didn't have anybody to train me. But Rudy will. Like I said, as soon as he can walk. How about if I train him to walk?
When Rudy is ready to walk, he'll walk.
I'll make him walk.
No, you're wrong. He's not big enough.
What do you know about sports? There's nothing that practice won't fix. He'll thank me for it later.
Don, he'll love you because you're his dad. Not because you're his trainer. Because you're a great guy.
The Y will have a program, and I'm going to sign him up.
All right, go ahead. You don't care. You think having him fall down and squash his head is good discipline.
Look, you wanted me to spend some time with him. I'm going to be spending a lot of time with him. And you'll be proud of us both.
Does that sound familiar? Mom is desperate for some time off. Dad wants Junior to be the athlete he never was. He thinks the sooner he starts training his son, the better athlete the boy will become. Mom, though, doesn't share her husband's enthusiasm for the training program. She understands more about the natural course of human development, and she's content to let things develop at their own rate. This brings up a crucial point, though, because it underscores the biological nature of reproduction as well as development. For perhaps more than any of us realizes, reproduction and development involves chromosomes and genes. It all comes down to this molecule, DNA. In the nucleus of each cell, DNA coils in long strands which we know as chromosomes. So a chromosome is really a chain of genes, and a gene is just a tiny section of a chromosome. It's a vitally important section, though, because it literally directs the process of life, from the division of cells to the growth of our bodies, and yes, even to the development of our thoughts and feelings. Genes play a basic role throughout our lives. In the process of reproduction, the chromosomes recombine at random. There is no end to the number of possible combinations. And this makes each sperm and each egg different from all other sperms and eggs. They will meet in fertilization and create a genetic set of plans, a complete blueprint, which will not only build a new creature, but also lead it through life, from birth to death. Somehow it's reassuring to think that little Rudy is guided by the ageless wisdom of DNA. He will develop at his own rate. For like the physical differences between us, variation in growth rates is normal and natural. When his time comes, he will begin to walk, and his father can begin teaching him football. But to appreciate just how thoroughly our genes affect us, we should follow a life from its beginning. The journey of a sperm to fertilize an egg is behavior that only the genes can arrange. As the fertilized egg travels down the fallopian tubes, it divides. One cell becomes two, two become four, four, eight, and on and on. At around the sixth day, the egg, now grown into a ball of cells, attaches to the lining of the uterus and grows into the soft, spongy tissues which now line the uterus. The mother's blood flows through this layer and supplies nutrients and oxygen to the multiplying cells. The lining will eventually become a thin membrane called the placenta, which surrounds the unborn child. Soon, the cells have grown to be a mass the size of a grapeseed. It is now called an embryo because the cells are not simply dividing, they're also taking special roles and growing into the tissues of heart, liver, nerves, and other organs. Beginning around the 8th week, the embryo is called a fetus. Even though it's just 1 1/2 inches long and weighs about 1/10 of an ounce, it has the rudiments of all the body's organs. From now until birth, its body will merely grow as its organs mature. And finally, a child is born. At first glance, the little ones look rather similar. But that soon changes. Our genetic plans are in full production, and the differences among us quickly appear. Brown, black, yellow, the basic plan is the same, but the models are different. And we continue developing along the genetic blueprint we've inherited, and also reflecting the differences in our environment. It seems an incredible notion. Even at birth, we contain the potential for what a human can become. We also contain the limits. The concept of potential versus limits is not easy to comprehend, especially when it deals with humans. Experiments with animals help us understand that genetic potential and genetic limits are simply opposite sides of the same coin. For example, a dog can be persuaded to suckle lion cubs and raise them as her own. The lion cub acquires the strange self-image of a lion reared by a dog, and with dogs for brothers and sisters. A nearly normal, happy family. As the animals grow older, their play grows rougher. The dog stalks and moves like a dog, for he is reaching dog's potential. But the lions use their claws, the way lions have always used their claws, for their potential is that of a lion. Humans, of course, have the greatest potential of all. Still, though, potential lies in the genes. And even the legendary Vasily Alexeyev could not have lifted 550 pounds had he not inherited the constitution for size and strength. There was once a time when you could hold him in one hand. Who could guess that the first tortured walk of an infant could become the smooth stride of an adult? Or the first steps of an exquisite ballet. Watch this infant trying with drooling concentration to grasp a simple tablet. That same child may become a sculptor of diamonds, a man whose superb touch and infinite patience will carve a gem from a dull lump of carbon. We take it for granted we'll all learn to speak. But consider the amazing skills that speech requires. The elastic lips, the darting tongue, the pumping lungs. And as soon as we're old enough, we humans become social. Interacting among others is a remarkable skill. Communicating with people depends on complex senses and sophisticated brains. We must appreciate a symphony of sounds, motions, grimaces, smiles, odors, even taste. Only humans have the potential to communicate human thoughts to other humans.
I guess I stand in corners too much. I don't know. What was your name again?
Our basic nature is complex, and the fact is we arrive in life with a set of complex behaviors known as reflexes. Some of these are essential to survival. The sucking reflex, for instance. Other reflexes will become more useful later in life, when the child grows stronger and more active. Blinking, throwing up your hands, and turning your head away from an approaching bullseye is clearly the thing to do, and it seems to be innate. It appears without learning or practice. A sudden noise triggers the startle response. The infant blinks, jerks his arms, swivels his head toward the source. And infants can see clearly almost from birth. You can see his eyes following the object across his field of sight. When laid on his face, an infant turns his head enough to keep breathing. Stroke her cheek, and she instinctively turns toward the pressure, ready for a meal. Her little hands clutch anything placed within her grasp. She usually transfers it directly to her mouth. And of course, the most obvious of all reflexes is good for all occasions. It usually works just as nature intends. As the infant grows, its reactions grow more complex, but they still follow a preset progression. For instance, first comes creeping, then crawling, and finally, standing and walking. Those enormous first steps on the irreversible path through life. So this tiny creature lies on his back and stares at the world because his genes have programmed him to lie and stare. His DNA has made him what he is. But is DNA the only force that makes the infant what he is or what he will become? Absolutely not. Environment also makes the infant, and to an even greater extent, the adult. The womb is our first environment. But although the womb protects and nourishes us in our first 9 months, it can't by itself ensure a healthy baby. The mother's diet and habits can drastically affect her offspring's development. As the embryo grows, its heart pumps blood through the umbilical cord into the mother's placenta. The liquid flows through tiny loops where only a thin membrane separates the embryonic and maternal blood. Nutrients and waste can pass through, however, so the mother's blood supplies all the embryo's needs. But certain drugs and diseases can also pass through. The effect can be devastating. These pathetic children, for example, would probably be normal, given a normal pregnancy. But their mothers contracted German measles during the danger period, the first 3 months, and now they suffer deafness, cataracts, heart defects, and severe brain damage. This child shows the alcoholic fetus syndrome. His mother drank heavily while carrying him, so his brain was stunted during his early growth. His IQ will probably never surpass 40. His movements will always be clumsy. About to enter convulsions, this newborn infant is addicted to the same drugs as her mother. With proper care, she may recover, but she will have to endure a barrage of seizures. Malnutrition is not so obviously harmful as drugs and disease. But malnourished infants are often born too small to mature properly. Their brains may be stunted, and no amount of care can then reverse the mental damage we see here. Nourishment is also critical during the first 2 years. However, as we grow, our surroundings affect us more subtly, but just as surely as life in the womb. Now we have conscious control of our actions. By training and studying, we can learn skills that we wouldn't acquire without years of continuous effort. An athlete, a musician. They push their abilities to the limit of their genetic constitutions. But most importantly, we can expand the realm of the mind. By studying, we learn. By dreaming and trying, we create. These abilities epitomize man, and yet we're discovering some remarkable qualifications, a whole new perspective, in fact, which modifies our view of mental development. Consider little Rudy. Don claims that without his training, Rudy would probably have waited another 6 months to walk. For learning such general actions as walking and running, early training has little effect. Of course, Phyllis is glad to have time alone, and her son is having contact with his father at a time when it's crucial to forming emotional ties. It involves a phenomenon known as the critical period, a limited period of our lives when we seem to have the ability to develop a particular skill, behavior, or emotional bond. Nothing shows critical periods like a duck. When a duckling hatches, it's a puny little thing. It instinctively draws toward the nearest moving object, usually its mother, but virtually anything will do. It could be a toy dog. As shown in time-lapse photography, the duckling grows quite fond of its new mother within a few hours. And when a little duck decides that something's its mother, it's difficult to change its mind. This process is known as imprinting. The duckling has imprinted on the toy dog. If its mother should disappear, the duckling becomes frightened and peeps piteously. Until she returns to protect her offspring. But a duckling will imprint for a short time, about 16 hours, just after hatching. If there's nothing to attract it, the duckling passes through this critical period and never develops a strong bond like a duck raised by its true mother. Now, we humans are obviously more complex than ducks. On the surface, we don't seem to have critical periods, and we're proud of the fact that we can learn throughout life. But perhaps that's jumping to conclusions. The fact is, there are times in life when we learn best, and there are many skills we can't learn until we reach a certain level of physical, biological maturity. Walking, for instance. Most babies can't walk much before 12 months because they have neither the strength nor the coordination for it. This 3-year-old hasn't attained her full coordination yet, and no amount of training can improve it. On the other hand, this 6-year-old can easily catch the ball because his nervous and muscular systems are more mature. Speaking is much like walking. A child typically passes through stages where first he babbles, then utters single words, and finally the combined words of true speech. Then, from about 2 to 14 years, the child will be able to learn 1 or more languages fluently without an accent.
Wat is dit? Wat is dit?
Airplane.
Een vliegtuig?
Ja.
Zeg eens vliegtuig.
Vliegtuig. Ja.
Kun je met vliegtuig spelen?
Nee.
Ga spelen met het vliegtuig.
I don't want to do that.
Waarom niet?
But during the teens, children lose this ability to learn new languages so easily. In humans, critical periods can be very long, sometimes on the order of years. So long, in fact, that many psychologists reject the term critical period. They prefer to call the effect a sensitive period. But despite the lengthy time, the pattern can be amusingly duck-like. For instance, around the age of 6 to 12 months, a baby grows attached to the few special people who care for him. He becomes fearful of strangers and rejects their advances.
Bye, Tooth. Bye-bye, Tooth.
And like our little duckling, a 1-year-old infant grows very anxious when separated from its mother. The study of critical periods gives us new perspective on human growth and development. We're beginning to realize that our genes provide basic potentials, but we also realize that achieving our maximum potential depends largely on environmental influences, such as nutrition, training, opportunity, and loving care. So genes give us limits as well as potentials, but not too rigidly programmed. As usual, nature has included a saving grace. We have no idea what our human limits are. Our future is pure potential.